What is up, ladies and gents, Ghost here, and today I've got the next part in the jet tutorial. We're going to be talking about some basic dogfighting techniques. So in the first episode of the tutorial I went over speed control and the importance of learning horizontal loops as well as vertical and even diagonal loops. So I will link that video on screen now in an annotation, and if you haven't seen that video already, you really must go and check it out and master your speed control, because without that you're really not going to stand a chance in a dogfight. Now usually when I encounter an enemy pilot, you really do not want to underestimate the person. 90% of the time it turns out to be somebody who's pretty amateur, and I can simply do a horizontal loop, catch up to him via my superior speed control and take him out no problem at all. But you never want to underestimate the person who's in the enemy jet, especially if it's somebody in a stealth jet, because they could be a pro. Now the best policy is to start vertical looping, or even better, doing diagonal loops. These can be a little bit tricky to get the hang of, but if you get your speed control down, go in the test range and just practice doing them. They'll become second nature in no time at all. So first off, we're going to talk about the most difficult thing in dogfighting, and that is actually shaking a tail. Now for example's sake, let's say the enemy jet who is on your tail is pretty decent pilot, so he's got his speed control down and he can mimic your loops in any direction. So how do you get him off your tail? Well, there's a technique called switching. Now what switching is essentially changing the direction in which you loop. So whenever you switch from a horizontal loop into a vertical loop, or from a vertical loop into a diagonal loop, that is called a switch. Now the times that you really want to perform a switch is when you are either at the peak or the very bottom of the loop, as these are the times when you are the most out of sight of the enemy pilot. So as you can see from the footage here, I'm looping right to the top, and then I'm ever so slightly changing my direction in which I'm doing the loop. So the enemy pilot is going to think that I've carried on looping in the exact same direction when he reaches the top of his loop, and he's not going to see me anymore, and lo and behold, I've actually changed my direction. If you do this a lot of times at the bottom and top of your loops, eventually he can end up losing you completely and you can get on his tail instead. Now something you can really use to your advantage in this situation is your ECM, and this is actually the number one reason that I fly with ECM instead of flares. It allows you to disappear off of the air radar. 90% of the time you're dogfighting, the guy who is on your tail is not actually going to be able to see your jet physically in the game. He's simply going to be using his air radar to follow where you are. Now let's say in this example, he can't see your vapor trails from your jet, so he's really relying solely upon the air radar. If you wait until you get to the top or bottom of your loop, just about as you turn to switch, pop your ECM and you will disappear for a few seconds off of the air radar. That means he literally has no way of knowing which direction you went in if he can't see you on air radar and he can't see you in the game. You really want to keep your ECM for these dogfights as much as possible, and in fact if you don't have your ECM handy in a dogfight, it can mean the difference between the enemy jet taking you out rather than you being able to kill him. It can also be handy even if the enemy jet is on your vapor trails. So as you all know, you can see vapor trails from enemy jets in Battlefield 4, unlike in Battlefield 3, so once you're pretty close to taking out your target, you don't really need to concentrate on the air radar quite as much. You can actually just follow the vapor trails, and these will give some telltale signs as to exactly which direction you turned in. However, once you pop ECM, as you know, a big black smoke cloud comes out of the back, and the reason for this is to blind enemy pilots. So even if they see your vapor trails, they're going to be close enough to get blinded by the smoke from your ECM. This will give away your position in which direction you went a little bit, but for the most part it can be quite off-putting for enemy jet pilots. Now since 90% of the time spent dogfighting is going to be literally you staring at your air radar and trying to deduce in which direction the enemy jet went so you can get on his tail, you really need to get good at reading the air radar. When you're vertical looping and the enemy jet is vertical looping, your air radar will be going all over the place, and I think a lot of people find this really confusing. The only way to get better at this is simply through experience. Just get used to dogfighting with people, doing vertical loops, and figuring out the exact distance between you and the enemy jet and in which direction they're facing via the air radar. There really is no quick way to learn this, guys. It just comes down to practice. Now the best time to switch isn't always at the top of a loop or at the bottom of a loop. Sometimes you're not always in a situation where the enemy jet is tailing you. Sometimes you're both doing circles and you actually end up heading each other off face to face and passing alongside each other. Now when you hear the sound of the jet rushing past you, you may not see him on the screen, but you can always tell that he just brushed really close to you. That is the time that you want to switch. He's just past you and you've passed him. He has absolutely no vision of you at all, and you know that you can switch in a different direction and start a different kind of loop to try and throw him off. This kind of situation usually arises when you spot an enemy jet pilot across the map. If you're pretty sure that you spotted him, you really want to fly straight towards him. Don't go round in a horizontal loop, because that's going to give him the exposure on your jet that he needs to actually take you out. You know, just imagine if you turn to the left in a horizontal loop, he's going to be able to see the whole top of your jet, and that's going to be easy for him at range to take you out. What you want to do is fly straight towards him so that the amount of surface area on your jet is extremely limited and he doesn't have much of a chance to kill you. You don't want to ram into him though. Be careful of that, because a lot of amateur pilots will just fly straight towards you and ram you, try and move out the way of him, but as soon as you pass him, you hear that whooshing sound of him passing you, perform a switch, get into a looping cycle, and then keep on switching until you gain an advantage. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. These are some pretty basic tips and really just the start of dogfighting. There are some more advanced maneuvers such as scissors, but I'm going to keep those for another video, as those do take quite a bit of time to perform and also to explain about. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one and it will help you guys to get a little bit better. If you did enjoy, please give the video a like down below. I would appreciate that a lot. And if you enjoyed the tips, then feel free to subscribe for more. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.